Billionaire dad watches a waitress carry his disabled son and changes her life forever. How could you let this happen to my son? Carson Hayes' voice exploded through the upscale restaurant like a thunderclap, his fury so intense that every conversation stopped dead. The billionaire tech mogul stood towering over the trembling restaurant staff, his face twisted with rage as he pointed at the heartbreaking scene before him. 8-year-old Jackson Hayes sat in his wheelchair in the middle of the dining room, food splattered across his clothes and dripping onto the marble floor. Tears streamed down the little boy's face as he tried to wipe marinara sauce from his shirt with shaking hands. The collision with the clumsy server had happened in seconds, but the humiliation felt like an eternity. This is unacceptable. Carson's voice cracked with emotion as he advanced toward the manager, his expensive suit doing nothing to contain his volcanic anger. My son has been through enough without your staff treating him like he's invisible. The other diners sat frozen in their seats, their forks suspended mid-air as they watched the billionaire's meltdown unfold. The restaurant manager stumbled backward, his face drained of all color as he stammered weak apologies. "Sir, please. We're so sorry. It was an accident." But Carson cut him off with a roar that made the wine glasses tremble. "An accident? An accident? Look at him. Look at what you've done to my son." While the other waitstaff scattered like leaves in a hurricane, backing away from Carson's explosive fury, one young woman, Nova, did something that shocked everyone in the room. What Nova did next would silence Carson's rage, change 3 lives forever, and prove that sometimes the smallest act of compassion can move mountains. But before we dive into this incredible story, if you're already hooked, smash that subscribe button because what happens next will absolutely blow your mind. Now let me tell you about the 3 people whose worlds were about to collide in ways none of them could have ever imagined. Carson Hayes wasn't always the cold, explosive man you just witnessed. 6 months earlier, he had been one of the most successful tech moguls in the country, worth over $2 billion, but he was also a husband desperately trying to save the woman he loved. His wife Eliana fought cancer for 2 grueling years, and Carson threw every resource he had at the disease. The best doctors, experimental treatments, private hospitals. Nothing worked. The guilt ate at him every single day. While Eliana was slowly dying, Carson buried himself in work, convincing himself that making more money would somehow buy them more time. Board meetings during chemotherapy sessions. Business calls while she slept fitfully in hospital beds. He missed so many precious moments with both Eliana and their son Jackson, thinking there would always be tomorrow to make up for it. But tomorrow never came for Eliana. The same genetic condition that confined 8-year-old Jackson to a wheelchair ultimately claimed his mother's life. And now Carson lived with the crushing weight of knowing that his son not only lost his mother, but also felt responsible for her death. Jackson whispered to him one night, tears in his eyes, "Daddy, if I didn't have the same sick genes, maybe Mommy would still be alive." That bright, sensitive little boy who loved drawing dinosaurs and dreamed of becoming a paleontologist despite his physical limitations, now spent most of his time apologizing for existing. Every doctor's appointment, every wheelchair accommodation, every moment of extra care he needed. Jackson saw it all as proof that he was nothing but a burden to his grieving father. The truth was, Carson became overprotective to the point of suffocation. Not because Jackson was a burden, but because he was terrified of losing the only family he had left. Every stumble, every accident, every moment when Jackson was out of his sight sent Carson into a panic that made him lash out at anyone and everyone around them. But the young woman who just knelt beside Jackson's wheelchair had her own story of quiet desperation. Nova Brooks was 25 years old and had graduated at the top of her culinary school class just 2 years earlier. She should have been working in prestigious kitchens, learning from master chefs, building the kind of resume that would launch her career into the stratosphere. Instead, she was carrying plates and wiping down tables at an upscale restaurant, living on ramen noodles and tap water, while sharing a cramped apartment with 3 roommates. Nova walked everywhere to save on gas money, wore the same 3 outfits on rotation, and hadn't bought herself anything that wasn't absolutely essential in over 2 years. Why? Because Nova had a dream that burned so bright inside her chest, it kept her awake at night. She wanted to open her own bakery, a place where families could gather and create sweet memories together. But dreams cost money, and Nova's middle-class family learned that lesson the hard way. Her father once owned a small construction business that employed 12 people and supported 2 families comfortably. But one bad investment, one contractor who disappeared with their down payment, and one brutal economic downturn later, her parents had lost everything. Their house, their savings, even her father's tools, all gone to pay debts that weren't even his fault. Nova watched her father's spirit break when he couldn't afford to send her to the culinary school she'd dreamed of attending since she was 12. So she took out loans, worked 3 part-time jobs, and somehow made it through school anyway. But the debt and the memory of her family's financial devastation haunted her every decision. Every dollar she earned went into a mason jar hidden under her mattress. Every sacrifice, every missed social event, every night she went to bed hungry. It was all for the bakery fund that had grown painfully slowly to just under $42,000. Nova had another secret source of income that she told no one about, not even her sister Arya. Twice a week, she donated blood and plasma at the local medical center. Her rare AB-negative blood type meant she could earn an extra $150 a week, money that went straight into the bakery jar. She told herself she was helping people while helping herself, never knowing that her blood was being sent to the children's cancer ward at the same hospital where Eliana Hayes had spent her final months. Nova's 22-year-old sister, Arya, couldn't understand any of it. Fresh out of college with a business degree and a head full of corporate ambitions, Arya constantly told Nova she was settling by working as a waitress. "You're too talented for this," Arya would say, gesturing around their tiny apartment. "You should be working for some celebrity chef in New York, not carrying plates to rich people who don't even notice you exist." But Arya didn't understand that Nova witnessed firsthand what happened when people reached too high too fast. She saw her father's dreams turn into nightmares, and she was determined to build her own dream, slowly, carefully, and debt-free. What none of them knew was that fate had been weaving their stories together long before this moment. Carson's grief, Jackson's guilt, Nova's quiet determination, and even Arya's frustrated ambition were all threads in a tapestry that was about to create something beautiful. Because sometimes the universe puts exactly the right person in exactly the right place at exactly the right moment. And as Nova looked into Jackson's tear-filled eyes, she was about to prove that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear food-stained aprons and have hearts brave enough to step into other people's storms. The accident happened so fast that nobody had time to react. Michael, the newest server at the restaurant, was rushing to deliver a tray of dishes when he took the corner too sharp. His elbow clipped the back of Jackson's wheelchair, sending the 8-year-old's plate of spaghetti and meatballs flying through the air like a red comet before it crashed down all over the little boy. The marinara sauce splattered across Jackson's favorite dinosaur t-shirt, the one his mother bought him just weeks before she died. Noodles hung from his wheelchair like party streamers, and a meatball somehow landed in his lap, leaving a greasy stain on his jeans. The other diners gasped and pointed while Jackson sat there in stunned silence, his bottom lip trembling as the humiliation washed over him. Michael stood frozen with his empty tray, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The other servers backed away, suddenly finding urgent tasks that required their immediate attention. Even the restaurant manager seemed paralyzed by the potential lawsuit he saw unfolding before his eyes. But Nova Brooks didn't hesitate for even a second. She dropped the water pitcher she was carrying, not caring that it shattered on the marble floor, and rushed to Jackson's side. Without a word, she knelt down in the puddle of sauce and water, her uniform soaking up the mess as she reached for the cloth napkins on a nearby table. "Hey there, sweetheart," Nova said softly, her voice cutting through the chaos like a warm hug. She began gently wiping the sauce from Jackson's face, her movements careful and tender. "You know what? I think you just discovered a new way to eat spaghetti. Very avant-garde." Jackson looked up at her with wide tear-filled eyes, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Nova grabbed a clean napkin from another table and began sketching something with a pen from her apron pocket. Within seconds, she drew a smiling dinosaur with spaghetti for hair and meatballs for eyes. "Look," she whispered conspiratorially, "it's a Spaghettisaurus Rex. He's the messiest dinosaur in the whole Jurassic period." For the first time since his mother's funeral, Jackson giggled. Actually giggled. The sound was so pure and unexpected that it cut through Carson's building rage like a knife through butter. But Carson was already in full explosion mode. The sight of his son covered in food, the stares from other diners, the incompetence of the staff, it all triggered something primal and terrifying inside him. This chaos, this loss of control, this helplessness, it was exactly how he felt watching Eliana waste away in that hospital bed, unable to do anything to save her. "This is absolutely unacceptable," Carson roared at the manager, his voice shaking with barely contained fury. "Do you have any idea who I am? Do you understand what kind of lawsuit you're looking at right now?" The manager cowered as Carson advanced, his face red with rage. "I want that server fired immediately. I want him out of here right now." But then something extraordinary happened. Nova stood up from where she was kneeling, still holding the dinosaur napkin, and stepped directly between Carson and the trembling manager. She was tiny compared to the billionaire's imposing frame, but her voice was steady and calm. "Sir, with all due respect, it was an accident," Nova said quietly, her eyes never leaving Carson's face. "Michael is new, and he made a mistake. But look at your son, he's okay. He's actually smiling now." She gestured toward Jackson, who was still clutching the dinosaur drawing. "Maybe instead of focusing on who to blame, we could focus on making sure he has a good rest of his evening?" Carson stared at this young waitress who had just dared to challenge him, and for a moment, his anger flickered. There was something about her calm confidence, her gentle authority, that reminded him of Eliana. His wife had always been the one to talk him down from his rages, to remind him what really mattered. But the moment that truly changed everything came 20 minutes later. Jackson finished the new meal Nova brought him, extra careful this time, when he quietly tugged on his father's sleeve. "Dad, I need to use the bathroom," he whispered, his cheeks turning red with embarrassment. Carson looked around, and his heart sank. A small handwritten sign by the elevators read, "Out of order, repairs in progress." The bathrooms were on the second floor, and there was no way to get Jackson's wheelchair up the grand staircase that curved elegantly through the center of the restaurant. "We'll have to leave," Carson said quietly, already reaching for his wallet. The humiliation of the spilled food was bad enough, but this was just another reminder of all the ways the world wasn't built for his son. "Actually," Nova's voice came from behind them, "there might be another option." She appeared at their table so quietly that neither of them noticed her approach. "I could carry him upstairs if that's okay with you both." Carson's protective instincts flared immediately. "Absolutely not. No stranger is going to." "Please, Dad," Jackson interrupted, his voice barely above a whisper. He looked up at Nova with those same trusting eyes that used to look at his mother. "She smells like vanilla, like Mommy's cookies, and she drew me the Spaghettisaurus." Something in Carson's chest cracked open. He hadn't seen Jackson trust anyone new since Eliana died. For 6 months, his son had been withdrawn, suspicious, afraid of getting close to anyone who might disappear like his mother had. Nova knelt down to Jackson's eye level. "What do you say, paleontologist? Want to take a flight with Pterodactyl Airways?" She spread her arms like wings, and Jackson actually smiled, a real, genuine smile that lit up his entire face. Carson found himself nodding, unable to speak around the lump in his throat. Nova carefully lifted Jackson from his wheelchair, supporting him with surprising strength for someone so petite. But then she did something that made Carson's heart stop. "Okay, Captain Jackson," Nova announced in a playful voice, "prepare for takeoff." She began making airplane noises as she carried him toward the stairs, swooping him gently left and right like he was soaring through the sky. "We're flying over the Cretaceous period now. I can see a herd of triceratops down below." Jackson threw his head back and laughed. Really, truly laughed, for the first time since his mother's death. The sound echoed through the restaurant, and Carson felt tears threatening to spill down his cheeks. He followed them up the stairs, watching as Nova continued her pterodactyl impression, making his son feel like he was flying instead of being carried. When they reached the top of the stairs, Jackson was still giggling. "That was awesome. Can we do it again on the way down?" "Absolutely, Captain." Nova grinned, and Carson saw something in her eyes that he hadn't seen in anyone else for months. Pure, uncomplicated joy in making his son happy. As Carson stood outside the bathroom door waiting for Jackson, he pulled out his phone and sent a quick text to his assistant. "I need you to run a complete background check on someone. Nova Brooks. Works at Meridian Restaurant. I need everything. Education, family, finances, everything. And I need it tonight." Because Carson Hayes hadn't become a billionaire by leaving anything to chance. This woman had just done something that no doctor, therapist, or family member had been able to do in 6 months. She made his son laugh. And Carson needed to know exactly who Nova Brooks really was before he allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, there were still angels in the world. If you're as moved by this story as I am, make sure you hit that subscribe button because you need to see what Carson discovers about Nova's secret life. And here's what I want to know. Have you ever had a stranger show you unexpected kindness when you needed it most? Share your story in the comments because sometimes we all need reminding that there are still good people in this world. What Carson's assistant found in Nova's background would shock him to his core and prove that some connections go deeper than anyone could possibly imagine. Carson Hayes made a decision that night that would have shocked his business associates. He decided to become someone else entirely. The next week, when he walked into the restaurant with Jackson, he wasn't wearing his usual $1,500 suits or his Rolex that cost more than most people's cars. Instead, he wore simple jeans, a plain button-down shirt, and introduced himself to Nova as Brody. He told her he was a consultant who worked from home, nothing fancy, just trying to give his son some normalcy after a difficult time. Nova smiled and nodded, never suspecting that Brody was actually worth more than the entire restaurant chain he was sitting in. What started as one visit became 2, then 3, then every Tuesday and Thursday like clockwork. Carson would drive his modest Honda instead of his usual Bentley, parking 3 blocks away and walking to the restaurant with Jackson. He requested Nova's section every time, and she always greeted them with that same warm smile that made Jackson's face light up. The background check his assistant had run revealed that Nova Brooks was exactly who she appeared to be, a hard-working culinary school graduate with no criminal record, no scandals, no red flags of any kind. She lived paycheck to paycheck, shared a cramped apartment with roommates, and had been steadily saving money for almost 2 years. What the report couldn't capture was the way she made Jackson feel like the most important person in the world. Nova began bringing Jackson special treats that she made in her tiny apartment kitchen at 3 in the morning. Chocolate chip cookies that were still warm when she slipped them to him in a small paper bag. Miniature cinnamon rolls that melted in his mouth. Dinosaur-shaped sugar cookies decorated with green icing and sprinkles that made Jackson squeal with delight. "I'm practicing recipes for something special," she would tell him with a wink, never explaining what that something special was. But Jackson didn't care about the mystery. All he knew was that Nova's treats tasted like love, like the cookies his mother used to make when she was healthy enough to stand in the kitchen. Carson watched these interactions with a mixture of gratitude and pain. He hadn't seen Jackson this animated, this genuinely happy, since before Eliana got sick. The boy who barely spoken for months was now chattering excitedly about dinosaurs and asking Nova questions about baking and telling her about his drawings. One quiet Thursday afternoon, when the lunch rush died down and the restaurant was nearly empty, Nova did something that changed everything. She pulled a worn notebook from her apron pocket and showed it to Jackson, her eyes sparkling with excitement and nervousness. "Want to see a secret?" she whispered conspiratorially. Jackson nodded eagerly, leaning forward in his wheelchair as Nova opened the notebook. The pages were filled with detailed sketches of bakery layouts, lists of equipment and suppliers, cost breakdowns, and recipe after recipe written in Nova's careful handwriting. "This is my dream," Nova said softly, turning the pages slowly so Jackson could see everything. I'm going to open my own bakery someday. A place where families can come together and make sweet memories. She pointed to a sketch of a cozy storefront with big windows and cheerful yellow curtains. I've been saving money for 2 years now, and I'm almost ready to make it happen. Jackson studied the notebook with the same intensity he usually reserved for his dinosaur books. These recipes look amazing, he said, pointing to a page titled Grandmother's Secret Chocolate Cake. Is this why you practice making cookies for me? Nova's cheeks turned pink. Partly, but mostly, I just like seeing you smile. She hesitated for a moment, then continued. My grandmother taught me that baking isn't just about mixing ingredients, it's about mixing love into everything you create. She used to say that every cookie, every cake, every loaf of bread carries a little piece of the baker's heart. Carson, who had been pretending to read his newspaper at the next table, found himself listening to every word. There was something about Nova's quiet passion that reminded him of his own early days as an entrepreneur, back when he was building his first startup in a garage and surviving on ramen noodles and pure determination. But, Nova's voice dropped to almost a whisper, sometimes I get scared. What if I'm not good enough? What if people don't like my baking? What if I fail and lose everything like my... She stopped herself, shaking her head. Sorry, that's not something to worry a little boy with. Like your what? Jackson asked with the innocent persistence that only 8-year-olds possess. Nova looked around to make sure no other customers were listening, then leaned closer to Jackson. Like my father did. He had his own business once, a construction company. He worked so hard, employed 12 people, supported our whole family, but one bad decision, one person who cheated him, and everything fell apart. We lost our house, our savings, everything. Her voice trembled slightly. I watched it destroy him. He's never been the same since. Carson felt his chest tighten. He understood that fear intimately. The terror of risking everything on a dream that might crumble in your hands. That's why I've been saving so slowly, Nova continued. I know it would be faster to take out loans, to jump in with both feet, but I can't bear the thought of ending up like my dad. So I work double shifts, live on basically nothing, and put every penny I can into my bakery fund. It's taken forever, but at least if I fail, I won't take anyone else down with me. Jackson reached out and patted Nova's hand with the serious expression of someone much older than his 8 years. My mom always said that being scared means you're about to do something really brave. Maybe your dream is worth being scared about. Carson's newspaper crumpled slightly in his hands. Those were Eliana's exact words. The same thing she told him when he was afraid to leave his corporate job and start his own company. The same thing she whispered to him during her darkest moments in the hospital. That being scared meant they were fighting for something worth fighting for. Later that evening, as Nova brought their check, Carson made a decision that surprised even himself. Nova, he said quietly, could I ask you something personal? She nodded, settling into the empty chair across from him, while Jackson colored on his placemat. You mentioned your father's business troubles, Carson began carefully. I went through something similar once. Not a business failure, but losing someone I loved very much. Someone who believed in dreams even when they seemed impossible. Nova's eyes softened. I'm sorry for your loss. The thing is, Carson continued, his voice thick with emotion he usually kept buried, after she died, I realized that the biggest risk isn't failing. It's never trying at all. She would have been furious with me if I had let fear stop me from going after what mattered. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two people carrying different kinds of grief, but understanding each other's pain without needing to explain it. Maybe, Carson said softly, your father's story doesn't have to be your story. Maybe you're stronger than you know. Nova wiped away a tear she didn't realize had formed. Thank you, Brody. That means more than you know. As they left the restaurant that night, Carson carried Jackson to the car while Nova waved goodbye from the doorway. Neither of them knew that their lives were about to intersect in ways that would shock them both. Carson found someone who understood loss and fear and the courage it takes to keep dreaming anyway. Nova found someone who believed in her when she was struggling to believe in herself. But the universe wasn't finished weaving their stories together. In fact, The most incredible part of their connection was still waiting to be discovered. A truth so extraordinary that it would prove that some meetings are not coincidence, but destiny. The call came Tuesday morning. Nova's hands shook as the loan officer delivered the crushing news. Unfortunately, we're unable to approve your $50,000 loan due to your limited business experience. 2 years of sacrifice, living on ramen, walking everywhere, donating blood twice a week, all for nothing. Hours later, the property owner called with worse news. If you can't come up with the full $85,000 by Thursday evening, I have to accept another offer. That Thursday, Nova arrived at work with red-rimmed eyes. When Brody and Jackson came for dinner, she could barely smile. "What's wrong?" Brody asked gently. The story poured out. The loan rejection, losing 847 Maple Street in 24 hours. When she said 847 Maple Street, Brody's face went white. His coffee cup clattered as his hands shook. "My wife Eliana put a deposit on that exact property 4 years ago," he whispered. "She had the same dream, a bakery where families make sweet memories. She abandoned it when she got cancer, saying someone else would make it magical someday." Before Nova could process this impossible coincidence, Carson's phone rang. His assistant's urgent voice: "Nova's been donating AB-negative blood for 3 years. It all went to St. Mary's Children's Cancer Ward, the same hospital where your wife was treated. Her donation saved several children with your wife and son's condition, including 7-year-old Lily." Carson returned, face white. "Nova, have you been donating blood?" "Yes, twice weekly for 3 years. It helps my bakery fund and sick kids." Jackson, listening intently, whispered, "Daddy, her blood saved kids like me and Mommy, didn't it?" The word daddy exploded in the air. Nova's eyes went wide. "She wanted Mommy's bakery spot and gave blood to save kids like us," Jackson cried. "She's been our angel all along. Mommy sent her to us." Carson opened his eyes. "My name isn't Brody, it's Carson Hayes." Nova stood so fast her chair fell. "The billionaire? You've been lying this entire time? The bakery location, the blood donations, you've been investigating me, finding connections to your dead wife so you can replace her with the helpful waitress?" Her voice shook with hurt. "I'm just a vessel for your grief." She threw her apron on the table. "Find someone else to play your wife's ghost." Nova walked out, leaving Carson and Jackson in stunned silence as 2 impossible coincidences and 1 terrible misunderstanding settled over them. The universe had woven their stories together extraordinarily. But sometimes, even destiny needs help from the human heart to find its way home. 3 days passed in silence. Nova refused to answer Carson's calls, ignored his messages, and switched shifts to avoid him. On the 4th day, there was a knock at her apartment door. Carson stood there with Jackson, Aria, an elderly woman, and in the center, a little girl with a bright pink scarf around her bald head and the biggest smile Nova had ever seen. "Hi," the little girl said. "Are you Nova? The angel lady who gave me her blood? My name is Lily. I have the same sickness that Jackson's mommy had, but I'm getting better because of your blood. You saved my life." Carson stepped forward. "Nova, I know you're angry, but I need you to see something." He handed her a worn leather portfolio. This was Eliana's original business plan for the bakery. Inside were hand-drawn sketches almost identical to Nova's designs. Recipe ideas. A mission statement, to create a place where families can gather and make sweet memories together. The elderly woman stepped forward. "I'm Dr. Martinez from St. Mary's Hospital. Your blood donations didn't just help Lily. Over 3 years, your AB-negative blood saved 12 children's lives." "I don't want to recreate Eliana's dream," Carson said quietly. "I want to help you fulfill your own. Not because you remind me of her, but because you've shown me there are still people who give without expecting anything in return." Lily tugged Nova's sleeve. "Will you teach me to make cookies? I want to make them for other sick kids when I get bigger." 6 months later, Nova's Sweet Dreams Bakery thrived at 847 Maple Street. The corner held a memorial display of Eliana's sketches alongside Nova's creations. Photos of children Nova's donations had saved covered one wall. Aria managed the business, finally understanding her sister's vision. Jackson visited daily after school, his artwork decorating the walls. Carson balanced work and fatherhood over afternoon cookies. The bakery hosted monthly events for young cancer patients. Nova had developed warrior cookies, Eliana's favorite recipe, perfected through Jackson's memories and Nova's skills. As afternoon sun streamed through the windows, illuminating children learning to bake and families learning to heal, Carson slipped his arm around Nova. "What are you thinking?" "Maybe angels don't have wings," Nova said. "Maybe they just have hearts big enough to carry other people's pain until it turns into something beautiful." If you've been following this journey, hit that subscribe button, because stories like this remind us miracles happen daily. What small act of kindness have you done that meant more than you imagined? Share in the comments. Sometimes the smallest gesture connects us to something bigger. Nova carried Jackson for 30 seconds, but her years of quietly giving, her blood, her care, her dreams, had already been carrying countless others toward hope. That moment simply revealed the angel she'd always been, proving that when we love openly and give freely, the universe multiplies that love beyond our wildest dreams. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and share with others so they can learn too. See you in our next video.